Welcome, everybody. My name is Matt Reichert. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement at GIA, and I am happy to be your facilitator, your conversation captain here today as we introduce to you our newest hymnal, Gather Forth Edition. We have a great crew from our editorial department here today to walk you through this hymnal. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we are going to jump in as quickly as we can. A couple of housekeeping details. For those of you who are joining us live. You have the chat function on the right part of your screen. Feel free to say hello. If you have a question that you would like us to get to, please put that in the Q&A feature at the bottom. Then we can keep track of things and we won't lose it or misplace your question in all of the chat as it scrolls through. So if you have a question, you can put it there at any point in time and we'll do our best to answer it. If you're watching this recording, you can feel free to contact us with any questions that you might have, and we'll be glad to get you as many answers as we possibly can. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. And panelists, I'm going to just go in order that I see you on my screen. This might look different for all the rest of you, but Kate, you are first if you want to say hello and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Kate Williams. I'm the Vice President of Sacred Music at GIA Publications. And I am so happy to be here today talking about Gather For. Michael?
I am Michael Silhavy, Senior Project Editor at GIA. And anytime we talk about a hymnal, it's a good day.
Victoria, you're next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Isabella. I'm the Sacred Music Managing Editor at GIA. And of course, I'm thrilled to be talking about Gather For and seeing it finally come to fruition. So it's really exciting.
Perfect. PK?
And I am Peter Kolar, editor for Spanish and bilingual publications on the editorial staff at GIA. Happy to be here.
Great. And thanks to all four of you for being here. I know it's, like Michael said, it's always exciting for us to talk about projects, especially one like this, that so much time and intentionality has gone into. So I really appreciate you all taking the time to be here. And to all of our guests who have joined us live and watching the recording, thank you for taking the time to find out more about Gather For. We are going to share, like I said, a lot of information. We're not going to get to everything. But the good news is that even though we're not going to get to everything in the next 57 minutes or so that we're together, we have 4 more webinar sessions specifically about Gather For or related topics coming up in the next 2 weeks. So if you go to our website, you can find those other 4 topics. On Monday, this coming Monday, the 13th of September, we'll be hearing from several members of the hymnal committee that met over several years to put together Gather For, to discern its contents, especially in the hymns and songs section, which is going to be really exciting. We'll have a webinar talking about representation and inclusion in our communities and how Gather For can assist with that. We'll have a conversation about changing parish structures. So many of us, especially in the Midwest or the Northeast, are in dioceses where the very nature of the parish unit is changing through closures or mergers or other cooperative regional parish ventures, to talk about what that looks like from a liturgical music perspective, especially if you're in a place like I am, where every single one of your parishes in your cluster uses a different primary resource from a different publisher. And again, how Gather For can assist with that. And then we'll close out that series for now with a conversation about a lot of the other technology aspects and resources that we're developing to accompany this hymnal, specifically cloud-based resources. So look for more information. You're welcome to join us for all of these webinars. They're free, so please come back and journey with us as we explore the fullness and richness that this hymnal series provides. But enough about that. Kate, I'm wondering if maybe you can kick off the meat of this conversation by talking about exactly what is Gather For, and specifically as you think about our whole line of hymnals. And I'm thinking worship 4, ritual song 2, when you consider voices, we have one in faith, all of our hardbound hymnals. What sets Gather For apart from those other hymnal series? So what is this thing and where does it fit in terms of our library of hymnals?
Sure. I think one of the things that we talk about that I think is really interesting and compelling is that the name Gather, the hymnal called the Gather hymnal, becomes like an identity for communities. They start calling themselves we're a gather parish, or we're a gather church, we're a gather community. And it's been that way, I think, through a number of editions of gather hymnals. The first one meant to be more of like a supplement of contemporary music, but then really realizing that by combining some of the treasures throughout the history of our sung prayer with contemporary resources, that really serves a large portion of the worshiping, the singing, praying community in the nation. And so Gather began to really stand on its own 2 feet. And then people began to kind of identify themselves as, well, we're a green Gather parish, or we're a red Gather parish, we're Gather Comp 2 parish. And of course, most recently, Gather 3, the blue Gather. And customers have come to expect that about every 10 years, there will be a new edition of Gather. And there's a lot of excitement about what might that mean. So sometimes I think people, as a way of distinguishing it from other hymnals, people know that Gather 4 tends to lean a little bit more on the contemporary side of things, or the piano-based ensemble. However, it's not solely a contemporary hymnal. You'll find everything in this book, all the way from traditional chants to standard hymnody to new music that's kind of pushing some new boundaries, and we like to talk about that as music that is advancing our conversation of sung prayer. And so if worship is a little bit more organ-based or geared towards an organ-based community, and Gather is a little bit more piano-based, ritual song tends to kind of fit in the middle there somewhere. But there really is quite a diversity of style, genre, contributing composers in any of our hymnals. I think another thing to think about is how well a hardbound hymnal works in tandem with another resource. So if you are a community that knows that you'll have lots of contemporary needs, we also have a voices hymnal, which a few of the songs overlap from Gather 4 to voices, but really not that many. It's really just additional repertoire geared towards guitar-based or piano-based ensembles. A lot of communities have like a Sunday evening mass that they call their young adult mass, or their contemporary music mass. And so a supplement like that might be something that's appropriate for those types of communities. But then, of course, since we've joined forces with World Library, we have all kinds of good partner resources that can either be, primarily lectionary based, so that you've got the readings for the day, right in front of you according to season and time. That's a renewable resource, or even additional music. All of those resources also have some additional repertoire in them. So there's lots of ways we can talk about Gather the hymnal and Gather the partner. But I am really excited for Gather 4 because of how much newness and freshness it brings to our conversation. And it feels like this is the right time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the right time is sort of the mantra, right? That's been surrounding the process. Like I mentioned earlier, this has been a multi-year process going into bringing this hymnal to fruition. And Michael, I'm wondering if you could help set a little more context for us. This is a part of the Gather series, the Gather family. It's the 4th edition. And lest any of us are thinking about this like college textbooks, where you have the 4th edition of a textbook where maybe there are just incremental changes, right? Mm-hmm. Let's disabuse people from the notion that this is just Gather 3 with a few changes. This is something that's firmly in the Gather family, but also is distinctive from it. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what the Gather family is, but how this hymnal is a part of that and kind of stands on its own as well.
Yeah. So Kate invoked the first edition of Gather way back in 1988. That was the famous teal one. And yeah, this Gather was very much intended to be a supplement to Worship 3. In fact, you could purchase them in a bound set together. And really in the late 80s, that's when we still maybe saw that traditional Mass, folk choir Mass. Few years later, Gather Comprehensive comes along, and that is when Gather stopped being a supplement to a traditional hymnal to being a hymnal in its own right. And Gather Comprehensive, the green one, went on to become our most popular hymnal. So to a lot of us, the gather line means the mainstream. If you're having a hymnal in your church, chances are you're taking this gather approach with a mixture of styles. And as Kate said, maybe a little nod to piano bass, but is Come O Come Emmanuel best played on organ or piano? So Gather has really become our flagship hymnal, if I can use that word. So it's that middle of the road hymnal. There's a fun little play on words, I think. The first Gather, when it came out, the sense of gathering was really, and it talks about this in the preface, the first hymnal to gather the music of many different publishers. And once again, it's hard to think that 30, 40 years ago, this was a novel concept. Now I think we hear gather as the church gathered, composers and authors gathered, diversity gathered, expressions gathered. So there's been a wonderful play or a change of that word, not just gathering publishers. And of course, Gather does have a gathering of many, many publishers, but gather in a bigger sense of the whole church is gathered. So to be clear, Gather is that Gather family is that hymnal where most people, it's our most popular hymnal. It's our most popular hymnal.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Michael. I know we, in a lot of the ways that we talk about this, and we've trying to message and come up with that one sentence elevator pitch description, right? That people do when they're trying to tell people about projects like this. We've come up with a variety of things, right? This is rooted in tradition, both liturgically in the musical treasury of the church, but also focused on the future in terms of new things, right? We've also talked about this as really being, I'm talking about GIA now, our first 21st century hymnal. Not that we're 21 years late to the century necessarily, but really our first 21st century hymnal. And I'm wondering if, we're everybody with us who's like just dying to see the table of contents and get into this. We're going to get there in a minute. But I'm wondering if first we could talk about what exactly does that mean when any of us say Gather 4 is our 21st century hymnal. What exactly do we mean by that? I'm going to leave that open, and whoever wants to jump in can begin.
Well, I can start because I love the way that we talk about a hymnal as a snapshot in time. And I think we'll probably refer to this a number of times in these webinars because it's so true. I talked a little bit too in our preparation for this meeting about how, when you enter the work of theologizing, of theology, of sacred conversation, you're entering into a dialogue that's already 2,000 years old. And you're taking those parts of the dialogue that have journeyed with us over these 2,000 years, you're taking those into the context of today. And you're contributing what today has to offer, what your voice of today has to offer, what your context of today has to offer. And so every time that we go through a hymnal project that takes years, we're gathering as much of that dialogical voice as possible. So our committee members are representative of people from all across the nation, our readers of the hymnal, and of course, the people in whose hands this book will land are all a part of the consideration process so that we might make the most true picture of what the singing and praying church is today. And so I like to think of like that no hymnal is perfect, or no hymnal will last us forever, and nor should it, because the conversation is always evolving and always advancing. But this particular snapshot of today in the hymnal called Gather 4th edition takes into consideration all of the ways that we engage with our congregations, including through digital resources and electronic or virtual ways of being connected, of the ability to have your hymnal on your tablet if you can't always have it with you, but still, carrying on that tradition of having a hardbound book that has to it a weight and a significance in and of itself, and a beauty and a design. That too is a part of that conversation that we would like to continue, the tradition that we would like to continue and show, teach to our children, with all this other stuff, all the gifts and the blessings of today, the tough conversations we're having about how do we properly support those who are marginalized in our context today. How do we properly sing to and sing the reality of immigrants who are among us in our worshiping communities? How do we properly respond to issues of not only culture, but of race, of gender, of all types of diversity that our larger culture is trying to find a way to give voice to and to give space to? Our hymnal also has to do the same thing that our context is telling us is an important part of our time. And so that's a little bit of a lofty kind of way of talking about it, but those are the things that I think are really inspiring when you think about the task that we are, the issues that we are tasked with as music ministers. We have to be able to keep that kind of lofty goal or goals, in mind and with us, to keep us motivated and keep us grounded too.
Yeah.
I just jumped.
Yeah, go ahead,
one
Michael.
thing about Kate, the image of the snapshot, and how does this? Why is this a 21st century hymnal? And maybe Peter or Victoria later on can talk about these timelines. But sure, when Gather 2010 comes out, Gather Third in 2010, well, if the preparation starts 3 or 4 years before it, that's only about 5 or 6 years to gather stuff from the 21st century. This snapshot of time, I remember, and here we are, a few days before 9/11 anniversary. That was the moment that said, oh yeah, we need a lament section in our hymnal. And when we were working with the ritual song, and Pope Francis was very new into his pontificate, there were the issues that he was bringing to the front, immigration, and not just songs about creation, but the care of creation. And so when you look at Gather 4, as you mentioned, you're really going to see those issues that this church is dealing with at this time, which will make it great fun for hymnologists 150 years from now to look back and say, aha, this is what U.S. Catholics were focusing on. So that's a fantastic notion, that hymnal is a snapshot in time.
Yeah, and I think our hymnal committee really took that to heart, to take what they're seeing in their communities and the people that they minister and that they serve, and how the broader church represents that. And I know you'll hear from them in other webinars, but they were very intentional about thinking about the community and how people will sing the music in this hymnal, and how it will affect them, like you all say, in the times that we're in right now.
Kate, I really took to heart what you were saying, and for everyone on the webinar today, I encourage you to when you get your promo copy, or when you're able to peruse it for yourselves, read that preface. I mean, it really encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about here, and I love the idea that we're talking about a book, in a digital age, and of course there's going to be digital iterations of it, but there's still something dignified, just like a ritual book is up there for the lectors, and the Roman Missal is what's opened for the priest to proclaim those prayers. We're in the same sphere of ritual art and beauty is this hymnal, and so we talk about this very device that allows us to sing our praises, that comes from a long storied tradition, even within our company at GIA. But all of you here on this webinar are here specifically for that. The launch of a new hymnal is something very exciting. And this book is at once new as it looks forward to carry our church forward into a new worshiping reality. And it comes very much from a long line of tradition. It's amazing to think that our planning began years ago, and no one could have envisioned a pandemic being in the midst of all this, but that the launch of this hymnal is now coinciding with a reemergence into what we're hoping is a sense of getting back to normalcy, but also a simultaneous discovery that our new reality is not going to be the same normal as what it was before. And I can't help but believe that the Spirit is at work with the whole creation of this. And as the committee gathered to discern their repertoire that would populate the pages of this, and looked at the catalogs and the available repertoire from amongst Catholic music, that the Spirit was indeed at work in all of this. And so it's infused. Where two or more are gathered, there indeed Christ was and will continue to be through the sung notes and lyrics that will be on the lips and hearts of people proclaiming this praise.
I know folks viewing want to get to the contents, but just one more thing. So Peter, you talked about, what a time as we're coming back to gather for church, as we're starting to sing again. So here's this new hymnal coming out. Really an odd time for this to be happening simultaneously. And I think someone mentioned about every 10 years we come out with a hymnal. That your hymnals last more than 10 years. So we're talking to all of you who've got the Gather Comp hymnals from 1988, time to move on. So, but the repertoire changes and the needs change. So we also know about 33%, 25% of every hymnal we do gets new material. So this timeline is right on. We now know what really worked with the missal translations. We'll talk about that later. So it really is a wonderfully coincidental time to do this hymnal in the midst of everything going on in the world.
That's great. As those of you who are joining us live or the recording can tell, like we're really excited about this hymnal. So we could keep talking about this. Thankfully, again, we have 4 further conversations to explore. So we're going to start to get into this thing. April asks a question that I think is good for us to address now. And the question is, when do I get a copy? The answer is right now. Kate has what the cover looks like, although if she opens it, you will see that it's blank. That's just, we have 2 review copies just to see what the cover looks like, and that's it. The Pew editions are being printed as we speak. They should be in our warehouse towards like the 3rd week of September or so, and then we have to get them out to people. So review copies or all of our copies are being printed. They're coming to us. We'll send them out as soon as possible. Those of you who have registered for this webinar live, we will be sending you a follow-up email with a link where you can get a digital review copy of the entire hymnal. So you can start looking at it now until we can get a physical copy in your hands. And those of you who are watching this afterwards should have registered for the webinar. No, I'm just kidding. We'll have a way for you. We'll have a way for you to also sign up and send us your email address so we can share with you a digital review copy in the meantime until physical copies are able to be sent out. You can find other information, though, of course, between now and when you get a digital or physical review copy. So I am going to share my screen quickly, so brace yourselves as your screen shifts here. This is our website. If you go to giamusic.com, especially our sacred music division, and you have these sliding banners at the top, this is where you can find information about our upcoming conversations, our 4 further webinars. The second banner, you can find information or the webpage specifically about Gather 4. Those of you who are viewing live, I put in the chat a link to this. So you can find Gather 4, you can see this webpage, and you can see what the front cover looks like, designed by Dan Cantor, and it's beautiful. And it's a visual representation of all the intentionality and all of the approach and all of the theologizing and everything that Kate and Michael and Peter and Victoria have talked about that went into this book. It's a beautiful visual representation of that. If you take a look at this website, I just want to point out a couple of things that you can look at now, and then Kate's going to share her screen for the actual PDF version of this book. You can see the reference guide, so you can flip through this reference guide and start to see information about the committee. You can see information about what's inside, the new material, the advancing material that Kate mentioned, the balance of publishers, where you can see how we really have brought together some of the most important music from all kinds of publishers that are being sung in the church today into this one resource. You can also see some of the other features of this hymnal that are going to be available to help serve your community. A little further down, I don't want to skip through this too fast. And oh, by the way, Michael wanted me to mention, this is his hand on as the presider here. So that's Michael. So duly acknowledged. If we keep scrolling, you will see a bunch of information that we're going to talk about in a second. But this is where you can download all of the indices. So if you want to see which composers, authors, sources are here, download it. If you want to see first lines, common titles, service music, liturgical index, metrical index, topical index, tune index, any of these things, go here right now, download them, and you can start to take a look. Again, we know that that's not a substitute for seeing the whole thing, holding the book, but until that happens, until you have your copy, this is where you can go to find a wealth of information, and you can start going there now. Other information about, again, what this looks like in your community can be found here. Testimonials, there's Kate, everybody wave to Kate. One License, our hymnals app, Gather Cloud, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes and in a couple of weeks, as well as then all of the editions that we have coming up. Everything is here in this one-stop shop. So I encourage you all to go to that website, go back to that website, share it with your colleagues to find information until you get your review copy in hand. All that being said, right now I'm going to ask Kate, if you wouldn't mind please sharing your screen. I believe what we're going to see is the Pew Edition. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, we'll start there.
Perfect. And Kate's going to show us the beginnings of the Pew Edition so we can get a sense of these major sections. In particular today, everyone, we want to focus on the Psalms, hymn setting, service music in the front. We're going to talk about the comprehensive Psalter. We'll talk a little bit about the hymns and songs section, although we'll talk about that as well further on Monday in our conversation with the hymnal committee. So Kate, I'm going to turn this part over to you if you want to walk us through some of the beginning sections or kind of give us our footing here, orient us to the way this hymnal is laid out.
Sure, I'll just really quickly touch on some of these some of the text that you'll find in the beginning of your hymnal, because I don't know how many people actually pay attention to that, but we actually have gone through a number of editions of our hymnals now. We've included this wonderful description of so many parts of the way that we pray. I think this was originally written for us by Gabe Huck, and we've had it updated since then with help from Rita Thyron at FDLC and Diana McAlintal, who's been with us on several webinars. And so you should probably recognize her name and face. And so it's all been freshly updated, but also this is just really, really good information to accompany us through Liturgy of the Hours, through the rites of the church, through the order of Mass, so that when people are in their pews waiting for Mass to begin or just coming to church to pray, there's all of this wonderful information that kind of reaches people in a pastoral way as well as an informative way. And it shows people kind of what is the order of the liturgy for morning prayer, evening prayer, what kind of psalms are included in these types of liturgies. I love that we include even night prayer here. Oh, I must not be, yeah, it's after this. Okay, so here's all the psalms. I think Victoria's going to talk about these in a second. So I'll skip over these. Don't get seasick. I'm going pretty fast. And then we get to, here we go. the rites of the church. So you can have extra information here to maybe go in depth in your choir rehearsals. If there are some of your choir members who are like, what exactly is the RCIA? What does initiation mean? What are the sacraments of initiation? There's a bunch of help here, either for you to walk with your ministers and with your congregants while they're learning, or for them to simply take and kind of digest and get to know and love on their own. So we'll go quickly through here, through the rites, through confirmation, through reconciliation, anointing of the sick, marriage. There is a new marriage rite that came out in 2016, Michael. So this has the updated texts that are prescribed within that rite. Here's the order of Christian funerals. This is very helpful. Two, for planning purposes, for families of the deceased, or for you when you're accompanying families of the deceased. We include up here in the front, both stations of the cross to help you put together a liturgy for the Station of the Cross, as well as Taizé. And I think the first time that we put in an instruction and a little bit more information about what Taizé prayer is, I think that was in Ritual Song 2?
Ritual Song 2.
So this is something we learned from our last hymnal that we did, Ritual Song 2nd edition, that there are so many communities who love to play or who love to pray in the style of Taizé, in the way that the brothers of Taizé have taught us, by mantra and repetition and lots of singing.
Kate, I just want to jump in quickly. As you were going through that, I hope people saw that, once again, if they're part of the Gather family, so many of those items are the same. So if your congregation has taken the time to invest themselves in acclamations for baptisms or funerals or RCIA, you're going to find those same acclamations. But as always, a couple might come out, so a couple new ones can come in. But there is this sense of comfort that, oh yes, this is the response that we've been singing for 20 years. I'm so glad it's in the hymnal. And in other places in the hymnal, there's new responses for you. But that's part of that continuity, that the stable repertoire we want you to keep, but there's always new stuff for you to sing also.
That's right. So these will certainly look familiar to a lot of people who are Gather communities. This is the order of Mass with responses in chant style, in chant form. So I will keep going here so that we can actually get to the Mass settings, which I think people would be curious about. Setting number 1 in many of our hymnals has been Mass of Creation. But what's different about Mass of Creation this time is that we also include a bilingual Mass of Creation. And I just saw somebody in a Facebook group just yesterday saying that the bilingual Mass of Creation is their diocesan Mass setting. I believe it was somewhere in Texas. And I know there's Texas people on this call, so maybe they can confirm that. But what's great about pairing them together is that it kind of takes this standard repertoire, like Michael is saying. This Mass of Creation is something that you would expect to see in a Gather hymnal, that you probably know and do in your own communities, and so you see yourself in it. But also now you see this thing that you've come to know and love and claim, and you see it in Spanish. Because, shocker, there are a number of Spanish speakers in our communities nationwide, and it is time that we elevate the language and the music and the culture to the same position that we have long enjoyed for traditional repertoire for English speakers. I'm sure there's a more eloquent way to say that, but I love that these settings are one and the same. They're both part of setting 1. It's a way to honor our evolving and changing communities, and also find some way for us to feel like we've got some solid ground as English speakers, as longtime singers of Mass in English.
Kate, I'll also jump in, Kate, that the Mass of Creation, the bilingual version of it, there was also some question about how it was constructed. Previously, when it was bilingualized, as it was, where some of the Eucharistic acclamations were a fixed bilingual form. And now in this gather, they're completely bilingual. So you can sing it fully in English or fully in Spanish or bilingually rendered. So there was some question as to how it's appearing. And so you have that option now.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
And if I may, can you go back a couple pages? So you might have thought, wait, why do we start the Gloria halfway through the Mass? Why isn't this bilingual setting up front? Folks, here's a level of detail that we think about in this process. Kate, please go to the next page, the acclamations, or a couple over. We didn't want these same memorial acclamations, A, A, B, B, C, C, appearing on the same page for fear that you launch into the English only version when you're doing the bilingual version or something. So that was actually intentional to set these in the back to make it easier for you. So that's how much care we take about these things. That's fun.
Okay, Boomer. Thank you, Michael. Setting 2, Mass of Joy and Peace, is one of those settings that since the Roman Missal 3rd edition came out, we have come to know the settings that have kind of risen to the top and become the most popular settings with the new translation. And this is certainly one of them, Tony Alonso's Mass of Joy and Peace. And so you'll find that in Gather 4th edition as well. What's new here is that there is a through composed version of the Gloria. You're not going to find this in any other hymnal because it's a brand new publication. I think it really only came out as a separate edition a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago. But now you've got it here. You've got the through composed version and you've got the refrain verses version here, as well as the rest of the Mass setting. Mass from Age to Age, Chris De Silva, a wonderful blend of contemporary sound with incorporating chant and incorporating Latin throughout the Mass setting. This is a beautiful setting. Chris De Silva was also a part of the hymnal committee. So he is one of those participants who walked with us in this 3-year journey to make the best choices that we possibly could for this project. The 4th setting, the Welcome Table Mass, this has not been in a Gather hymnal before. So this is brand new to a lot of people who call themselves a Gather community, but I have come to love this Mass setting. Each part of the Mass is set to the tune of a different spiritual, and this is it was kind of conceived by Dr. Kim Harris, who's at Loyola Marymount University, and Roger Holland, who is now a part of our editorial staff. He's the series editor for the In Spirit and Truth music series. And there's always a question too, that how do we incorporate the voice of women throughout the hymnal? And Kim Harris is just a genius when it comes to spirituals, and her really authentic way of both living and breathing and teaching us what it means to be Black and Catholic. Here is this wonderful Welcome Table Mass setting. So we get to learn those tunes, those beloved tunes of the spirituals set to the text of our liturgy. Each one is a different spiritual. So each one's a little bit different, but I'm going to call your attention to a couple of things in here. I don't know if you know the spiritual Fix Me Jesus, but take a look at this Prayer of the Faithful. How easy and just absolutely sensical is this? Oh, hear us. Oh, hear us. Oh, hear us, Lord, hear us. And that, of course, comes from, oh, fix me, fix me. Oh, fix me, Jesus, fix me. So how much sense does that make? Well, it's beautiful, it's simple, it teaches us something about the people, the music, and the text, and how they all work in harmony with each other. Another thing that I really love about this Mass setting is the Lord's Prayer. How often do you get a chance to teach your congregation a new setting of the Lord's Prayer? You're either going to speak it, you're going to chant it, which I love. I love chanting the Lord's Prayer. A lot of people love the Steve Warner version of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, which is also in this book. But here we go, the Lord's Prayer. which is based on the tune Nobody Knows the Trouble I See. And if you sing through this whole thing, please, please do. It's another one of those ones that's just like, you know instantly that it makes all kinds of sense, functionally, musically. It feels right when you sing it. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You can already tell it's going to be perfect. Do it. Teach your congregations this setting. And of course, the Lamb of God too, to my Lord, what a morning. This is just, it's a beautiful, beautiful Mass setting. Please, please check it out. This is one of my favorite Mass settings. It has been for a long time, even before the translation. So this is a revised setting from Steve Janko, the Mass of Angels and Saints. I bet a lot of you are familiar with this already. And I want to answer Andrew's question because it's a good one. Andrew asks, will the congregational responses, the dialogues, acclamations, decrees be printed on the inside, as was the case with Ritual Song 2 and other hymnals? Yes, it will. Ritual Song actually had them printed. I'm going to show you this as an example. Printed here and here, so right on the hard cover and here. Gather is going to have them on this first kind of cardstocky like page, so on this side and this side, and that's so that other hymnals have done this too, like Gather 3rd edition did it this way. That's so that if you're a community who is interested in doing like the donor plate, in order to raise the funds for the hymnals in your parish, you'll have a nice clean space to do that right on the inside front cover. So thank you for that question, Andrew. I'm so glad you guys are getting Gather 4th edition. Mass of Christ Light of the Nations is a new Mass setting from Tony Alonso. This is definitely brand new to Gather 4th edition, and a number of communities in the I think just like 4 years that it's been out have come to appreciate this setting. It kind of has it's in D minor, so it has a very solid kind of singable feel. And if you don't know that one already, definitely go check that one out. Okay, here is the Mass of St. Anne, which is a good example of what our partnership with World Library has enabled us and how it has enabled us to grow. This beautiful setting from Ed Bulduck is a very contemporary feeling Mass setting. And if you know a part of it already, it's probably this Gloria, right, Michael?
Glory.
It's one of Michael's favorite things to sing around the office. So good job, Ed. But here we go. The whole Mass setting is in there. Another offering from Roger Holland, the Sound of My People Mass setting. I saw John Flaherty's on this call, and I know John Flaherty programs parts of this Mass at the LA Religious Education Congress. So there are parts of this that will feel very at home to people who are familiar with that annual event. And thank you, Roger. This is an excellent, excellent setting as well. Then the Storrington Mass. It's funny, both, I think Michael uses this Mass setting, don't you?
I do. Yes,
yeah, and my husband uses this Mass setting at Old St. Mary's downtown in the Loop. Another just very sturdy setting from Marty Haugen. And then of course we end here at setting 10 with the Cantus Missae. But we're not done.
There's
because
more.
There's even more. In this service music section, these are just parts, these are Mass settings that some of them are really nearly entire Mass settings, but we opted for one reason or another to leave a part of it out. So you'll find settings that are not complete. They don't have every single part of them in here. They'll be in the service music section. So here's some sprinkling songs, and they go in order of the liturgy. So you'll see a number of sprinkling songs followed by a number of Kyries. A lot of these are familiar. Here's a brand new one for the Christmas season. Let's see, a lot of familiar stuff that would be consistent with what was in Gather 3, as well as a lot of new stuff. I'm trying to get to the Misa Luna. Oh, and here is another, I want to point this out too, Lena Gokelman, a setting of the Prayer of the Faithful that is, you've got 3 different options here. And Lena Gokelman was a part of the Gather 4th edition hymnal committee as well, representing Texas, and her context is a campus ministry context as well with the incarnate word. Here's another, we've got
They're all there.
They're all there. We got Marty Hagen, we got Michael Jonkis, we got The Land of Rest, another favorite setting of mine. We used to do that one just a cappella. The Deutsche Mass. Oh,
There it
who is this? It's
Is
Peter
that-
Kolar.
Is that Association of Catholic Publishers Mass of the Year award-winning Misa Luna?
That's right.
Distinguished mass setting. Yes.
Distinguished Mass setting, Peter Kolar. Here it is. Holy, holy. Memorial acclamation A. Amen. If you need a quick and strong example of how to use Eucharistic acclamations in a bilingual context, go to these pages, 431, 432, 433, because it's all right there from the master, the distinguished mass setting master, Peter Kolar. We are just so lucky we get to have Peter Kolar on our team. I can't say enough about it. Here's that Lamb of God from the Misa Luna as well.
Sung from the Papal Mass.
Oh, look at that. Okay, that's it for mass settings, Matt.
I mean, and already, like, that's if there wasn't cause enough to get this thing right, just in terms of, you know, I think about in my communities, the service music that we use, or the opportunities that the mass settings provide for us, you know, really to be inclusive of all of the members of our community, our singing and praying community. But the resources that we use, where we had a lot of mass settings that we loved and were an important part of our community, there always seemed to be this disjointed nature of, as we sought greater inclusion, not only in terms of culture and style and language, but also who composed these settings. When we got to the mass acclamations, that's where we sort of fell off of that, because we didn't have the resources in our hymnal. And now we have this consistent approach to inclusion, I think, with the mass settings that we have, both from time, from style, from composer. I'm really excited that the settings that we include in full and the settings we have in service music are there, because it really is an exceptional resource. Before we get to the comprehensive Psalter, anything that we want to say quickly about the Psalms that are in the front right before the mass settings begin? I know, you know, Michael, as you pointed out, there are so many responses here, and I'm translating to this section. There are so many psalm settings that are in part of the DNA of our singing communities, and we have so many new psalm settings that we've placed there that will quickly become part of our community DNA. Any quick comments for anyone before we move away from this front part of our book and move to comprehensive Psalter about the psalm settings that are included? No, other than they're awesome and you should sing.
Let's move on. Yeah.
Other than they're awesome, and yeah, we could certainly page through them, and maybe we will too in another webinar. I don't want to take up all the time, but even just paging through them, you can see the diversity of style and offering. So it's kind of fun to just sit down with it and play through them.
I think, Matt, both just what Michael's talk of the hymnal in itself being a snapshot of the Catholic Church of today, in a smaller micro level, the mass settings, we just saw that very same kind of that same phenomena, and also you'll find that with the Psalms as well. It's like a snapshot of the rich diversity that we are today.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, your old, or not old, but your favorite psalm settings are there, and just going through the mass settings again, I'm reminded of how excited the committee was when we were putting that together, and it sets the tone for everything else to come in the book, for sure.
One of the things that you'll find, dear participants, when you go to look at the hymnal brochure, or when you receive your copy in the mail in the coming weeks, we have a couple of charts there that show both for the psalm settings and mass settings, but also the hymns and songs, sort of the breakdown, certainly by publisher, by style, etc. But one of the pie charts that we have there has to do with what repertoire is new or advancing. So you'll see in this hymnal, 60% or so is music that comes from a gather hymnal. So that might be something that was in green gather that didn't make it into maroon or blue gather that's back. It might be something that, was first introduced to blue gather that's here. I say that to say that there's a corpus of material that's common to the gather family. Then there's another 20-some% or so that is in a gather hymnal for the first time. might have been in ritual song to might have been in worship, might have been in something else, but now for the first time is in a gather hymnal. And then there's another 15 to 20% that's advancing repertoire, that's new repertoire in a GIA hymnal for the first time. And that same breakdown finds its way into the service music, into psalm settings, into hymns and songs. So make sure to check that out. One of the things I want to get to that's not in the indexes, again, remember you can go to that website to download the indices and you can get a wealth of information there, is to talk about the comprehensive Psalter. And Victoria, I know you worked really hard on putting this comprehensive Psalter together. So I'm wondering if you can lay out for us what exactly this comprehensive Psalter is, but what are some of the distinctive features about Gather 4's comprehensive Psalter in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a whole host of us in the editorial team that looked at all of the different psalms that are in our catalog, from standalone psalters to psalters that accompany our many hymnals. And you know, we sat them all down and we went Sunday by Sunday and we looked at all the settings. And what we tried to do was find a nice variety and balance of style, of composers, of format, your chant, your through composed, and put that all together for our music ministers into one resource. And so you'll see a lot of women composers, especially in this resource. You'll see some great gems from the Lead Me, Guide Me Psalter. Really just a great diversity of psalms and things that, you know, many music ministers try to do for themselves and for their communities, but all things that we think congregations will enjoy, that they'll find singable, and that nice balance, I think, that we're seeing throughout all these different sections of Gather we were talking about. And so it was a very intentional process. We definitely, you know, wanted to get a nice Psalter put together, but I think many of us on this call are very, very excited about it, and it's already available. They're already printed. So, you know, even if you're not a Gather community, it's a great standalone resource. You can use these psalms with any hymnal or renewal resource or whatever your church has. So it's a really, really exciting part of the hymnal for sure for all of us.
What I love about the comprehensive Psalter is that I think it honors and validates what a lot of music directors are creating on their own. I think a lot of music directors are aware of and attracted to this idea of diversity within psalmody. I mean, who doesn't know a music director who kind of pokes around on GIA's website, OCP's website, and tries to find either a new arrangement of the psalm or the best arrangement of the psalm. And so to kind of honor that work that music directors are already doing, and, you know, if we can make things easier for people, why wouldn't we? We've tried to, do some of that work through discernment within our own circles. And so what I love about it in honoring that work of music directors is also that it lifts up all of the voices that perhaps are new to a Gather community, lifts them up and puts them in the same stable as so many of the voices that Gather communities have come to know and love. And it was, Victoria, it was really a joy, a stressful joy. But if it wasn't stressful, I think the stress is a sign of how seriously we took the work and how much we care about getting it as right as possible for the people who will come to know and love it. And I am psyched about it. There's just nothing else like this type of a Psalter out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have many composers. Sorry, Matt.
Go ahead, please.
Composers who have not been in our Psalters before, so a lot of new voices to add to the repertoire, and it's really fun to look at everything and kind of piece everything together. But we just hope everybody are all excited about it as we are. So.
Yeah, and again, on that point, Victoria, that's exactly right. And for those of you listening, again, if you haven't gone to download all of the indices, go download the composer author source material index and look at all of the names, of course, that are familiar, but also the names that are new. This is so exciting to be able to introduce this wonderful work from a whole host of composers for the first time in a Gather hymnal or the first time in a GIA hymnal. We're really excited about that. Just so participants know, we're going to go just about 5-10 minutes or so over the hour, just because we have a couple more things to talk about, and we do want to get to as many of your questions as possible. We want to be respectful of your time as well. So again, if you have to leave, we understand, and you can always catch the last portion of this on the recording. I want to shift us to talking about some of the different editions that are going to be available, some of the other resources that are going to accompany this hymnal as we release it over the next coming months. One of the things that we want to make sure everybody knows and understands is, of course, all of the editions that you've come to expect from a GIA hymnal or a Gather hymnal are going to be there, right? The keyboard editions, the guitar editions, B flat, C instrument, choral editions, etc. One of the new printed editions that we have with this hymnal is also a lead sheet edition. So I'm wondering, somebody on the call, Kate or Peter, if somebody wants to walk us through, how does the lead sheet edition differ from the guitar edition, and why is this an edition that's going to be helpful for me when I bring it back to my parish?
You got it. This is another thing I'm psyched about. The lead sheet edition is different from a guitar edition. Traditionally at GIA, a guitar edition for us means that we include the melody and all the other vocal parts in addition to the text and the chords. So people who have come to use that resource have been guitarists and pianists, and it's the only thing that really makes sense for percussionists. However, and bass players, anybody in your rhythm section. However, a lot of songs used for liturgy are like long. And a percussionist doesn't always care what all the vocal parts are. So a lead sheet strips everything down really to just the chart, to the number of measures, the chord symbol. So here, if there's a capo, that will be present there too. And just the melody line, just the pertinent melodic information that you need to be able to follow along and participate. And that makes everything able to fit on either 1 or 2 pages. So if you're an instrumentalist who needs both hands in order to pray with your instrument, you don't have to worry about needing to turn the page. This, I think, is a game changer for a lot of contemporary ensembles. It's also the thing that I would use as a gigging musician. So I sub in a lot of churches, and oftentimes, especially communities with limited resources, though we know and we preach and teach the goodness of having a separate minister at the keyboard and a separate minister for the cantor ministry. Oftentimes when you're using what you have, you end up being both. And this is what I would use, because when I'm trying to do all of those things at once, I'm trying to keep all the balls in the air. If I could have the pressure of not having to turn my page at the right time and make sure that I don't turn 2 pages instead of 1, this is the resource that I'll use for my gigging work. So you can see here this acclamation from the Mass of Creation. I've also got an example here. A Weary Couple, that beautiful new text from Adam Tice, is in this hymnal. And here's the lead sheet version of it. So you can see you've got the information you need here to know what's happening in that short introduction. You've got the text there so that you can participate along by singing, the chords there so that you can accompany yourself or others. And here you can see it fits all beautifully just onto 2 pages like that. So,
and it includes capo chords wherever appropriate as well.
Yeah, capo chords where appropriate. So if you have a drummer at your parish, your drummer is going to shout for joy.
Yeah, or the non-singing guitarist, the bassist,
Yeah.
Even some keyboardists. So
Yeah,
it's super helpful.
Example of how a psalm will look in a lead sheet form. Just the melody, chords, and lyrics here. There's not the extra choral or vocal information, so it fits nicely there. Michael?
If I may, just to be sure, folks, this is not the actual page. It's not gotten into the layout yet. So there will be the hymnal number and all that stuff, the copyrights and the composers and stuff. So I know this looks different, but we just take these sheets and plop them into the one. So yes, there will be hymnal numbers. Someone had asked about that. There will be hymnal numbers on all of these.
Yep.
Perfect. And Kate, you mentioned in terms of, you know, the structure of this as a gigging musician playing from this. I mean, obviously we also have the keyboard editions as well, both the landscape and loose leaf. Anything you want to say about the keyboard arrangements or the keyboard edition? I know you have some of those pages already queued up in your.
I do. I certainly do. Let me share my screen again, and I'll show you what I mean. So here is the landscape version of the keyboard edition. So we'll also have a spiral bound set where each one of these half pages will take up the space of 8.5 by 11, a full sheet of paper. We'll have those spiral bound and also in a 3-ring binder. So for those of you who like to simply take out those accompaniment pages and put them in your binder for the weekend, we'll have that as well. But some of these, let me see if I can find some good examples here. Here we go. Here's a brand new song of farewell for funerals. And you can see here, we've got Spanish, we've got English. You can make your combination of the two if that's what's appropriate for your community. A simple keyboard part here, as well as the chords. So this might be a good situation for someone who needs the keyboard part written out, but also if a guitarist is peeking over your shoulder, your guitarist will be able to follow along as well. And there are we have so many good piano arrangers in our GIA family. We've got Jeannie Cotter, we've got Chris Da Silva, we've got Bob Moore. We have just an insane fold of really good keyboard writers.
Ed Bolduc.
Ed Bolduc.
And Peter Kolar.
Peter Kolar, distinguished mass setting writer. So these, you know, a lot of keyboardists, even keyboardists who prefer to improvise their keyboard parts, find a lot of inspiration in the keyboard parts that are within this book, because we just have a lot of really, really good, well-crafting people doing it.
There was a question earlier, I believe in the chat, or maybe it was in the Q&A. All of the editions that we're talking about, certainly the standard instrumental or accompaniment editions, vocal, Pew Edition, and the lead sheet edition will be available digitally through our Hymnals app, as well as available in print. So there's a question about that. As we prepare them both for print, we're also preparing them for that digital format for those of you who play that way. I know we're a couple minutes over time, but one final thing we want to do before we get to the last remaining questions and final thoughts is to talk about some of the other digital resources that are coming out in coordination with this hymnal. So you'll find this in the hymnal brochure. You'll find information about this on that Gather4 website. We have 2 cloud-based services that I'm really excited about, and I hope you will be too. One of them called Gather Cloud, one of them called Psalm Cloud. Gather Cloud is a cloud-based portal subscription service that gives you access to the digital editions of all the contents for Gather4, as well as expanded octavo editions or other arrangements from our catalog of holdings based upon the titles that are in the hymnal, as well as many entries from past editions of Gather that we can provide you in that portal. So especially for those of you, like Michael referenced earlier, who might be Green Gather holdouts, who are still using those taped together Pew copies and choir copies of Green Gather, who are understandably concerned about moving to a new resource because of the things that have found a home in your community that won't be coming with you into this new hymnal. A Gather Cloud subscription would give you access to as many of those things in Green Gather as possible for you to continue using with your community, as well as access to, like I said, instrumental or octavo versions, full versions of things other than just the hymnal reduction that we'll be able to make available in that library. We have a webinar specifically on Gather Cloud coming up in a couple of weeks. So I just want to mention that as a topic sentence and not get too much into the specifics, because we do have that coming up in a few weeks and we'll share more. Similarly, we have a Psalm Cloud subscription, which is like a subscription Psalter, essentially, where every week you will have access to any of the settings of Psalms that we have in our catalog for that feast or Sunday coming up. So this coming Sunday, Psalm 116, I will walk in the presence of the Lord. You can log into your Psalm cloud and you will see all of our settings of Psalm 116 available for you to download, print, give to your cantors. So it takes this concept of, gather comprehensive Psalter and expands it to all of our holdings. Again, a resource that we think is going to be really handy for any music minister, but especially those who are serving in multiple places or have a variety of liturgies on a weekend where you're looking for a variety of psalm settings. This is something that puts all of that at your fingertips. And again, a subscription service. We'll talk about that as well in that upcoming webinar. Anything about the cloud-based things that I'm missing as I wet people's whistles here about the digital things?
I just think it's really exciting, and it opens up so many doors for people in all different directions. I'm so glad we're pursuing this.
Yeah.
And we'll have a chance to expand on it more in the upcoming webinar. So.
Yeah, exactly right. Mary asks a question about the choral hymnals available at the same time as the Pew Edition of the hymnals. The Pew Edition are going to be in stock first, followed close behind by other editions as we send them off to be printed. Is that a fair way to answer the question?
Yeah, so like the keyboard and guitar and instrumental books, we do all of those in-house. The reason why it's a little bit hard to answer that question is because we know the Pew Edition of the hardbound hymnals will be in-house in matter of days here. And then we're kind of at the mercy of the printing house for when they can get the choral books to us, but it will be shortly after. It was a big goal of ours to be able to get multiple editions available at the launch of the hymnal for this hymnal, because traditionally the other editions of the hymnal have kind of come over time, over months after the initial Pew book launch has happened. And we know that when you get a hymnal for your parish, you want all of the resources in order to make the hymnal work, in order to help it fly at your community. So we're doing our best. Michael?
In 2010, when we launched 4 hymnals at once, shortly meant a couple years. This is not that type of shortly. So we're talking weeks or months. So it's yes. You've heard us say shortly before. That was for 2010 when there were 4 hymnals coming out. So weeks and months.
We're bumping up on the end of our time here. Just a couple of things, and I'm going to ask panelists, each of you, just for sort of a final thought. If there's something you didn't get a chance to say, you want to say, or you want to spike the ball on something we've already discussed, you have an opportunity in a second. But a couple of housekeeping things before we get to final thoughts. Those of you who have registered for this, again, we have your email. You'll be receiving a follow-up from us shortly about how you can get the digital review copy for the Pew Edition imminently. So please make sure you keep your eyes out for that. Once we have the physical Pew Editions in-house, as Kate mentioned, we'll be sending out review copies to people as well. So the digital version is just a placeholder until you can actually hold this beautiful book for yourself. We've used words multiple times or phrases multiple times over this hour. You're going to hear it in the upcoming, these same words or phrases in the upcoming 4 webinars that are coming up. Again, please register for those. We have talked about intentionality. We've talked about discernment. We've talked about inclusion and representation. We've talked about proven repertoire, both proven repertoire that we own from other publishers. One of the words that I want to add to that mix is coordination. This focus on inclusion, representation, proven repertoire has been coordinated across all of these editions, across all of the sections of the hymnal, from the comprehensive Psalter to Psalms to Mass settings to hymns and songs, in the digital editions that are being presented. This is something where this mindset towards what we wanted this hymnal to be is being applied in all of the work and all of the various editions that are here, and that's really exciting. Even the design and the look of the book has that same type of coordination. And because again, we want everyone in your community to see themselves in this hymnal, and have done everything possible within our power to make that as true as possible in all areas of this project as possible, and we're excited about that. Don't forget you have that brochure and those indices available for download from the Gather4 website. If you don't remember how to get there, you can always find both the links to the Future 4 webinar registration pages and the Gather4 web page on those slider images on our website, giamusic.com. And with that, final thoughts. Kate, final thought before we sign off for the day.
I have so much energy about this book and about people coming to experience this book. And I just feel like it's kind of this collective ride we're about to go on with each other. And I'm so grateful for being entrusted with the privilege of kind of guiding this process. I feel so edified by the conversations that we've had with our committee, externally, internally, with our readers. And now I'm beaming at the idea that within days here, within weeks, you'll get to be a part of that story with us. I'm just so grateful.
Great, thanks, Kate. Peter, final thought. Oh, you're muted, Peter. Sorry.
I grew up with GIA hymnals. To be part of this process now is just amazing. The legacy, the heritage that this line brings with it, but also to see it coupled with the newness, and a company that is very cognizant of what our church is today and what it is going forward. No one makes a hymnal like GIA. I mean, it is really the best. I invite all of you listening on this call, to share in our enthusiasm, to check it out for yourselves. You will not be disappointed. You will be very, very much pleased with what you discover. So take that journey with us, and thanks for being here with us.
Great, thanks, Peter. Victoria.
I mean, there's so many things I would echo here, but when it all gets down to it, it's really about the sung prayer of the people, and that's what was at the forefront of this hymnal. And there's so much intentionality and just a desire for a really beautiful book that will enrich your congregation's worship and liturgy and everything that goes along with that in their spiritual lives. So it's really a very exciting book. And again, comprehensive Psalter is available, so you can do a little sneak peek there. Really excited about that part. But it's just been an honor and a pleasure to be a part of this. And our whole team, there's a whole team of people that are working on this project. So it's an amazing undertaking, and it's really been a pleasure.
Great, thanks, Victoria. Michael.
I have nothing to add. I mean, you said it all. We've got 4 webinars. But Kate, hold up that book that you have and open it up and show the folks inside. Yeah, this is the book I'm getting for my choir because they never sing what's on the page. So.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael. All of you who joined us, thank you. Again, we are more than happy to talk about Gather4. We really want to talk about what Gather4 means for your community, right? It takes a lot of work and a lot of discernment to figure out what goes in this book, because we know it has to matter to the people that you serve and the communities that you serve. And we want it to matter in the communities that you serve. So we are happy to talk to you about Gather4 as long as you will let us. So please join us for the upcoming 4 webinars. Please share this video recording with members of your music ministry. Watch it again if you are looking for those details you might have missed. Download the indexes, take a look at the review copies. Thank you for all of the work you do, the hard work you do in the trenches to bring the church's song alive. We know how difficult it is, and hopefully this is a resource that can help make that job a little bit easier. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful Thursday, and we'll see you on another webinar soon. Thanks. God bless.
God bless.
Everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.